state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Carl Nieberlein, Nieberlein.
Okay, and what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer.
And is that the City of Sparks?
Yes, City of Sparks, Nevada.
How long have you been a police officer with the City of Sparks?
24 years.
And Officer Nieberlein, what is your involvement, generally speaking, with the DUI checkpoints conducted in Sparks?
I'm the grant administrator for the police department and the Joining Forces coordinator. And the Joining Forces program is what provides the funding and typically the motivation to conduct those DUI checkpoints.
Okay. And are you involved with determining when, where, how they're going to be conducted?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe that? How are you involved in the when, where, how?
The when, it falls upon, as part of the Joining Forces program, there's 29 agencies in the state of Nevada that have law enforcement, traffic safety duties, and about 26 of them participate in the Joining Forces program, and we have an annual meeting where we set a calendar. And it's based partially on what the agencies are capable of doing and partially upon what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is who provides the funding. It's passed through grant funding, part of the T21 funds from the feds. They have special areas or times that they want things to happen. For example, Memorial Day weekend is always flip their ticket. We always have an impaired driving event that occurs during December and goes through New Year's to coincide with Christmas and the New Year's Eve. So when the Joining Forces people, coordinators get together, our calendar is partially decided by those and partially decided by what we can do. We try to coordinate with some of the local events, like we have Hot August Nights. There's a speed enforcement campaign during that. And down in the southern part of the state, they have the Laughlin River Run. So we have a motorcycle and speed enforcement campaign. I think that's in March is when that is. So it's a sort of a group consensus along with impetus from NHTSA as to when things are going to happen.
Okay. So with regard to December 18th, 2010, were you involved in the setup coordination of that particular checkpoint?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what was your involvement?
When we decided that we were going to have the impaired driving, which, like I said, happens pretty much every year, it's a NHTSA mandate, we decide that we're going to have a DUI checkpoint. There's a host agency, which in this case was the Sparks Police Department. The DUI checkpoint itself, there's some loose requirements based upon Michigan v. Stiffs, the Supreme Court case that governs DUI checkpoints. So we have to look at areas that not only have a high incidence of impaired driving and potential dangers related to impaired driving, we also have to make sure that there's areas where we can safely conduct them, because you can't just put them everywhere. They take a lot of space and require a lot of manpower. So we know that we have a good location that has lots of impaired driving arrests and has enough room for us to do this in the area of Reed High School and Shadow Mountain Park on Sparks Boulevard. So we decided to do it at that location.
So this time it was along Sparks Boulevard?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, specifically where along Sparks Boulevard?
Adjacent to Shadow Mountain Park in the north edge of the Reed High School area.
And is that located in the city of Sparks, to your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
So once you decide on a good location, as you've indicated, high incidence of impaired drivers, safe to conduct, what goes into then making it happen? And other than organizing with other agencies.
Right, not including the logistics of the other agencies, which go on for weeks on end. Once we have decided where the location is and we know that we have all the people that we need to do it, the day before, typically, sometimes the morning of, depending on the weather forecast, there's certain signage that has to be in place for a DUI checkpoint, and what we'll do is myself and a couple of other people will go out with a roll of tape and make the measurements and put it's spray chalk marks on the street that say this is where a stop sign needs to go, this is where a sign, whether it says police stop ahead or sobriety checkpoint ahead or whatever, or the 15-mile-an-hour sign. There's a bunch of signage that's required, and we make those marks on the roadway. And the distances that are involved are all based upon the manual for the Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD. which basically has a sliding scale based upon the width of the lanes and the speed limit of the street involved. And there's an NRS that talks about having flashing signals and those sorts of things. So we physically lay out the checkpoint the day ahead of time, typically, although sometimes it is that morning. If it's going to be raining or snowing, we'll do it that morning, because if it snows on the chalk overnight.
Mr. Arango, I appreciate the officer's expertise, but is all of this absolutely necessary to what we're doing today? If it is,
I believe so, Your Honor, but I'll move
right.
along to more important matters. Thank you, Officer. So, with regard to the checkpoint on December 18th, 2010, where was all of that followed, all of the requirements to appropriately set up the checkpoint, was all of that followed?
Yes.
Okay.
I object and believe that he has not been responsive to that particular question in just saying all the requirements. And he said he was marking the road.
Do you understand the objection, Mr. Arango?
I believe so. I'll rephrase.
I think it's a motion to strike possibly, but I'm not sure. Can you explain, Mr. Curry, what?
Yes, Your Honor, the NRS 484B.570 is very specific on exactly what has to happen with regard to each and every mark on the road. And he has indicated that he did the marks on the road, but he does not say that he set up any of the signs, the red flashing light, the things that are very important. He merely was there as preliminary, and that's just me wanting to object to that, preliminary to me making a motion to strike all of his testimony as irrelevant.
I'm going to rephrase my question, maybe break it up. I was trying to move it along, so instead I'll just break it up to be more appropriate.
All right, I'll overrule the objection subject to renewal, and you can go ahead, Mr. Arango.
Sure. So, Officer, you've indicated, as defense counsel said, that you went about and it's your duty to make marks to show where everything goes, correct?
Yes.
Okay, with the chalk, with the spray chalk. Okay. To your knowledge, did you do that? Was that done?
Yes.
Okay. And then, subsequent to the marks in the road, what happened?
The day of the checkpoint, there's a briefing that occurs prior to everything going on, where all the people are given their assignments and instructions. And then everybody moves from wherever the briefing location happens to be out to the location, and officers who are assigned to do the setup place each of the signs in the designated location. They put down all of the cones in the cone pattern that's designated. And the checkpoint is then constructed based upon the diagram that's been placed on the roadway.
Okay. And do you have any personal knowledge of whether that was done?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your knowledge?
I was there at the checkpoint and observed or saw the various signs being put at the various locations where they were designated to be, and all the personnel arriving on scene at the checkpoint.
Okay. Thank you. Now, is part of the signage, is there an opportunity to not be involved in the checkpoint, not go through the checkpoint
Yes.
by a driver? How does that happen? How do you not just end up in a checkpoint without knowing that you're going to end up there?
There's an escape route, which is the law enforcement term that's provided. As you're approaching the checkpoint, and again, it's based upon the speed limit of the street, and NRS has just been changed a little bit. But the notification is well in advance of the checkpoint, and there's, in this case, if you were coming northbound on Sparks Boulevard, you would have seen a sign prior to arriving at Bering Boulevard to tell you that there was a sobriety checkpoint ahead. So if you'd elected to not go through the checkpoint, you could have made a left or right turn and gone east or west on Bering and avoided it completely.
Okay. And what if you were coming on Bering? Would there been any notification?
On Bering, there's no requirement for any notification because the checkpoint's not conducted on Bering. And had you been on Bering, to the best of my knowledge, unless you looked over and saw it there, I don't think you would know it was there.
Okay. So the escape route exists coming on Sparks?
Right, because that's the requirement. There has to be notification on the street on which the checkpoint's conducted.
Gotcha. All right. Now, Officer Nieberlein, what is the purpose of all of this, of having a DUI checkpoint?
The twofold purpose is, number one, of course, to remove impaired drivers from the roadway, and the second one is so that there's a public education aspect to DUI checkpoints so that people are aware that these things can and do happen, and to provide a deterrent to people who may decide to drink and drive.
And with regard to stopping vehicles, what's the protocol? What vehicles are stopped? How are they stopped?
And during the DUI checkpoint, each and every vehicle is stopped. It's not done on any random basis. It's not every third. It's each and every one, so long as the traffic does not start to back up, because the DUI checkpoint, because of Michigan v. Stitz, has to remain a very brief encounter, a very brief delay to the motorist. So if traffic begins to back up so that people are waiting for more than a minute or two, then we free flow the checkpoint. We just wave the cars through. We don't stop anybody until the backup is reduced, and then once there's a gap, we'll stop the next vehicle and begin checking every vehicle after that.
Okay. And with regard to the second purpose, education, how is that accomplished briefly?
It's accomplished because the DUI checkpoint is a very large setup. There's police officers everywhere. There's flashing lights everywhere. The argument is if I put people out on saturation patrol, then the only people that know are looking for drunk drivers are the people that those officers stop. Sparks Boulevard has over 2,000 cars that went through the checkpoint, and presumably about 2,000 cars went the opposite direction. So for that brief period of time, 4,000 people knew that we do DUI checkpoints and that they could appear. And so that provides a deterrent, hopefully, for them to drink and drive, do drugs and drive.
Okay. And with regard to the officers on scene, are they all in uniform?
I can't say every single one, but 99% of them or so are.
Okay. Are they somehow designated as a police officer?
Yes, the people who have public contact are all wearing uniforms and designated as police officer from their agency.
And with regard to the first goal of the DUI checkpoint, to basically find impaired drivers, and you said there was a brief contact. How is that accomplished? How do you hope to find an impaired driver?
The officers stand in a line in front of the stop sign, and the vehicles pull up, and the first vehicle stops, and the vehicles subsequently stop behind them in a row. And then when they're stopped, each officer will approach the driver's window, have that person, if they haven't already done so, roll down their window, and usually they will say something along the lines of, "Hi, I'm Officer Nieberlein from the Sparks Police Department. We're conducting sobriety checkpoint, and you've been drinking tonight." And while the officer does that, he's looking for bloodshot, watery eyes, a smell of alcohol or drugs. In some cases, we have marijuana smoke come rolling out of the windows. They're looking for any signs of impairment or anything that's unusual or suspicious that might lead to impairment. The person will usually answer that they haven't been drinking or using drugs or whatever the case may be. We thank them for wearing their seatbelt if they have it. If they don't have it on it, then we'll ask them to put their seatbelt on and have a fine evening. And so the entire interaction is usually somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds.
Okay. Now, if something is noted that could indicate impairment, what happens then?
There's a secondary screening area that's adjacent to the checkpoint. If there's somebody that we suspect is impaired, they're instructed to turn into that secondary screening area so they don't clog up traffic in the checkpoint. And there are people who are assigned to do a more in-depth investigation to determine whether or not the person's impaired.
Nothing further, thank you.
Were you present when the defendant herein was arrested on that evening?
I was present at the checkpoint when they had the initial encounter. We were in the traffic backup. I was about 10 cars behind him. And then when he was actually removed and taken to the secondary screening area, I was nearby, but I wasn't directly.
Based upon that, Your Honor, I would make a motion to strike all of this testimony as irrelevant, as he did not see the circumstances in the pertinent affair. This is before this court.
Your Honor, relevant evidence isn't necessarily simply eyewitness testimony to an event. I believe Officer Nieberlein's testimony is relevant to the DUI checkpoint, what was conducted that day. It's an obstructing charge, has to do with what the authority of a police officer to issue commands, and I believe his testimony is very relevant to that.
Anything in addition in support of the motion?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Section 9.03.020, obstructing a police officer, is very specific with regard to the requirements that any person to obstruct a police officer is acting lawfully in a governmental function with knowledge that the person obstructed is a public officer. If a person obstructs a public officer, if he or she, and then it lists a variety of things. He could not possibly have witnessed what occurred because he was not present, Your Honor. It is very specific in its elements and with regard to intention.
My response is going to be the same as to prior motions or objections. First of all, it's overruled, and then secondly, subject to renewal. On the surface, it has relevancy. The extent of relevancy remains to be seen, if any, and so that is we would, for now. Do you have further questions?
Yes, Your Honor. In light of the court's ruling, yes. Do you specifically recall on that evening if a red flashing light was placed at the beginning or at 1/4 of a mile from the entrance to the administrative roadblock?
Specifically, I know that there was a flare burning at the base of the sign that said sobriety checkpoint is.
But do you recall if there was any red flashing light? Is your answer no then?
The only red flashing light, other than what's on police cars, that is mounted to the stop sign at the beginning of the DUI checkpoint that flashes red. I know that it's there because I have a continual issue where it has a sensor that turns off when it's daylight, so we have to play with it. But yes, there's a red flashing light mounted to the stop sign, and there's a fusee burning at the base of the sign that says sobriety checkpoint ahead of its first encounter.
And then my question was, is that 1/4 of a mile from the entrance of the administrative roadblock?
It is, I don't know the exact distance because it's measured in feet, and it's over 1,000 feet. It's south of Bering Boulevard.
And were you required to determine whether it was more or less than 100 yards from that by the information that you just stated in response to direct, that you were the one who was picking the places all of the signs would be by putting chalk on the road?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't understand the question.
Were you the one who was to determine where the red flashing light would be placed, because it was your job then to determine by putting chalk on the board?
Yes, I measured the location of the signs and the items that are placed.
And did you measure where the red flashing light and make specific instructions that a red flashing light would be in that position?
Yes.
And how far was that?
I don't know the exact distance because it's based upon the MUTCD. The very first sign that they encounter is based upon the federal regulations that require you to do certain things. It's the same regulations that tell you a stop sign has to be a red and a yield sign has 3 sides. And the federal law states that based upon the width of the roadway, the speed limit of the road, the signage has to be placed at certain intervals. And I don't know what that exact measurement is without referring to whatever the notes were for that.
And was it your job then to ensure that those lights were working at the time of the administrative roadblock?
It wouldn't be my job to, but I did.
And do you recall specifically that all the signs were in the places that you designated that they were to be for that administrative roadblock?
Yes. When I drove through the checkpoint just prior to, I told you we were stuck in the traffic jam behind it. As we're driving through the checkpoint, I checked to make sure a sign hasn't blown over or the fuses haven't gone out, and I noted no irregularities up to the point where I was stopped, which was probably 10 car lengths, whatever that would be, maybe 200 feet.
And did the officers have reflective vests on over their uniforms that evening?
Yes, they're required to wear those.
And does that cover the indication that they are police officers?
The vests say that they're police officers. The badge and the gun and the barracks uniforms are different because, remember, there's several agencies involved, and also the police cars with their lights on and the various other paraphernalia that's out on the roadway would designate that it's a law enforcement function.
And are they required then to identify themselves as police officers to each and every person who is stopped in the roadblock?
No, they're not required to.
Thank you. Nothing further. No, Your Honor, nothing further.
Step down, officer.